Baylor's defense got absolutely worked against Auburn in week 1. But here's why the rest of the Big 12 should still be terrified of these Bears.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I mean, you feel like you'll turn it around next week?
100%. This is something I take as it should make everybody go harder. If you put your head down, I told the guys, like, this isn't the moment for that. This is the moment to use it as fuel. We should come back Monday hungrier than ever. I'm still hungry. I feel like I can still play another 4 quarters. So if you guys aren't feeling like that, then you shouldn't be here. This is who we are. We're perseverers. And we did it before. We can do it again.
They have done it before. That's Keaton Thomas about the mindset immediately after the Auburn game going into week 2 against SMU. Welcome, Bears fans, to another week, another preview here on Locked On Baylor. I'm your host, Cam Stuart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. Appreciate you guys making it your first listen today and every day. On today's episode, we are going to look through the positives from this game. Definitely from the offensive side of things, this new breakout star that Baylor has and some serious depth on that side of the football. Let's hear what Dave Aranda has to say about that and who really stood out on the defensive side. There's a huge upside on Baylor's defense that I didn't think we'd be talking about after they gave up 38 points and gave up 300 rushing yards in week 1, but we will go over that. And SMU potentially a little short-handed in some very key areas going into this week's matchup. We'll take an initial look at the Ponies and talk about the positives from week 1. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. We start where we start. I did say there were some positives, even though week 1 was extremely frustrating for Baylor. Like, I'm not going to back off this and say, no, it was really frustrating. It was a winnable game. There shouldn't be any excuses inside that locker room. But what I will say is, for the most part, that offense looked pretty good. 24 points is below what they should be at. 17 points in 5 red zone trips, which I talked about on yesterday's show. Not quite good enough. But certainly the seeds are there once again to have a very special offense. And it's going to hurt not having Dawson Pendergrass. But I think Caden Knighton played a good game. Obviously, he had a touchdown against Auburn. I think the running game will figure itself out when they're not playing from behind for an entire game. But the depth at receiver was very evident on Friday night. And that's one of the things I thought would be a real feather in the cap for this team. Now, of course, I was going off what Dave Aranda was telling us in fall camp, and I'm telling everybody who will listen, Lewis Brown the fourth, buy the stock. Lewis Brown the fourth, he's the guy. He's going to unleash the rest of this offense. But in reality, it was Kole Wilson, man. Kole had an awesome night in his Baylor debut against Auburn. He ends up being their leading receiver, 8 catches for 134. How about that, man? It's some big plays. He had a 60-yard completion, no drops on it, which is something for what we saw the other night in this Baylor game. To have no drops is a pretty good sign. 8 catches for 134, bursting onto the scene. Dave Aranda saying this is a special talent here.
I think Kole has been playing this way since he's been with us. And I think there's a real bright light inside of that guy. And it's contagious with him. And so the best for him is yet to come. I think we've got some other guys that are very talented as well that maybe need to catch that fire that he has because they've got that ability too.
So not only Kole Wilson, the breakout player, Dave Aranda is saying, but some other guys should learn from him, should take up his example. And I think what was so jarring to me is like none of us were like, Kole Wilson, no, he's nothing, right? Texas State, who cares? Because I've said it on the show last year, we saw Ashton Hawkins come in and really hit the ground running. Like Hawkins was a big part of last year's team, had himself a nice night on Friday. He'll be a big part of this year's team. And I think the similarities between these two guys and how their college careers had played out to that point made me think, okay, we're getting another Ashton Hawkins. And based on that performance against one of the best defenses they'll face all season on Friday night, he might even turn out to be better than Ashton Hawkins, which is a heck of a bar because Hawkins has been a huge part of this team in 2024 and now into 2025. I put it out on Twitter on the Locked On Baylor account. Like, hey, what were the positives you guys took from this game? Because I do think there were plenty of positives to go around, even though it was a super frustrating performance. And a lot of you guys highlighted not just the receivers, but Kole Wilson in particular. And I think he deserves that. Lewis Brown, I do still like Lewis Brown the fourth. You know, he only had one catch in this game on Friday, but I still think he'll be a big part of this offense. But when you look at Kole Wilson and you look at Michael Trigg, those were two special performances for this team. That's like real bright spots. Again, Auburn is one of the best defenses you'll face all year, right? You'll have to face Arizona State here in a couple of weeks. You'll have to face Utah later on in the season, who's always got a strong defense, and it certainly looks that way again. You'll face a fairly decent one in SMU this weekend. But it wouldn't surprise me if none of the other defenses on your schedule are as good as Auburn's. And they really couldn't cover you. They certainly couldn't cover Michael Trigg. Everything I was saying about Michael Trigg, maybe optimistically in this offseason, looked like it came to fruition on Friday night. I mean, 7 catches for 99 and a touchdown. And every time it was a money down, it felt like you were going to Michael Trigg. I'm telling you, the depth and breadth of this room was really impressive to me. You know, Colby Prentice makes 2 catches. One of them's a 4th down touchdown throw. You know, there's so much trust in Sawyer Robertson, and Sawyer Robertson has so much trust in his receivers. So it's on down. You know, Aranda's got the trust in Jake Spavital. Spavital has a lot of trust in Sawyer. Sawyer has a lot of trust in all of his receivers throwing it around the yard. So Kole Wilson absolutely has to be the breakout player of the week. If you have 8 catches for 134, Michael Trigg certainly stakes his claim with 7 for 99. Your top 2 receivers, I would say, top 2 receivers in this game, I would say still had plenty of question marks going into this season. And the way they cooked up that Auburn defense, that is a major, major positive for this offense going forward. So it was only 24 points, and it wasn't enough to win the game. But weirdly, I say weirdly because, again, only 24 for a team that averaged almost 34 last year, 34 a game, this still feels like an offense that could be better than last year's. And at times, it did feel like, it's going to sound crazy, but it felt like the way the Briles offense looked once it started getting going. Did it look like 13, 14, and 15? No, that's like literally number 1 offense in the country. But it looked like when this thing kind of started to take off in about 2010 is what that looked like on Friday night. Potent, gonna win you some games, just not quite at its zenith yet, but it looked really good. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Who were your biggest positives on the offensive side of the thing? Sawyer Robertson still throws for 420 yards in this game. Bryson Washington will have better games when they're not down 2 scores in the blink of an eye. I think we've come to learn that. And we'll do it against better defenses. But let me know what your biggest positive from the offensive side of things was in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps us on the path towards 5,000 subscribers, and it helps you get the latest Baylor sports coverage, exclusively Baylor sports coverage, every single day, completely for free. Coming up next, let's look at some of the positives on the defensive side. Cam, what? Trust me. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Supply House. Look, guys, you need supplies, and Supply House is where supplies live until they get to your door. Okay, and I've got the read here. For those of you thinking I'm just stalling, I do have the read. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items for the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, going for it on 4th down like Dave Aranda, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. And if there's anything we've learned from the movie business in the last 15 years, you need to have that covered. Need parts fast for a project? Supply House has next day delivery. Talk about a game changer. Join the free Trade Master program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use the promo code SH for Supply House, SH College, and the number 5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. And the episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Rugiet Ready. Of course it is. They're with us all season long. You've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. It's a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that could take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use the code LockedOnCollege for 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege to use the promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. Coming back here on Locked On Baylor, and certainly I was very critical of Baylor's defense after Friday night. Baylor's defense against Auburn was nowhere near good enough. Not even close. 307 rushing yards they allowed, forced one negative play in the entire game, and they gave up 38 points at home for a team that only passed for 108 yards. That's not good enough. So how's Cam Stuart going to spin this? How is he going to tell you that there was actually positives on Baylor's defensive side of the ball? I'm glad you asked, because there were some positives. And there's a good tweet out there from the Sikkim 365 account through PFF. They go off the PFF grades. And when you look at the highest rated players, obviously Kole Wilson going to be number one. How about Kobe Prentice making the most of his snaps? But 3, 4, and 5, all defensive backs. And the names that stick out, I've talked a lot about Devin Bobby the last few weeks, but Caden Jenkins, who was not technically a starter in this game and was coming off a rough year towards the end of 2024, sitting there at number 5. And number 3, right there in the middle, how about Tevin Williams? Tevin Williams, man, a guy who's been here a long time. He's paid his dues. He's been in and out of the lineup the last couple of years. He's gone through injuries. He's been a starter. He's been not a starter. He's barely seen the field at all at some times. And when he was called upon on Friday night, he made plays. He had to get his toughest assignment of the season in week 1 against Cam Coleman at Auburn. So how about that, man? You battle for a starting spot the whole summer, and then they say, okay, you've got it, pal. Now take on Cam Coleman week 1. And he limits him to 1 catch. And he deflects a couple of passes, has good coverage on another times they were looking for Cam Coleman. Bottom line, it's 1 catch on 4 targets. That's some credit to Tevin Williams, man. I know. The Baylor rush defense was so bad that Auburn did not have to pass all that much. But when they went to Cam Coleman, 75% of the time, it was locked down by Tevin Williams. And Dave Aranda himself was very impressed with the way his vet played this and with the special coaching he's been getting by one of the new staff hires in the offseason.
I think he's very fast. He's very smart. I think early on probably could have more physicality here and probably a harder hit needed there. And he's addressed that. And he's improved in that facet. I think Paul's been really good for him because I think Paul's Gonzalez is driving him pretty hard. And I think there's times where Tevin gets uncomfortable, which is a good thing, you know. And so I think his best football's still ahead of him for all the years that he's been playing football, because I think he's getting pushed to growth and I think the top level for him is at the top of the route. He's making a play. He's coming down with the ball.
So a lot of good things to take away from that. Paul Gonzalez instantly making an impact. Again, the new defensive backs coach that comes from Gary Patterson's tree at SMU thinking about this week's opponent. Nope. From TCU, where he did an excellent job coaching a couple of different positions there, but mainly, again, the defensive backs. We knew that was a big problem for Baylor going into the season. And it reminds me of the first couple of games last year where you didn't see a great offensive line performance, but you saw good individual performances. And it's like, okay, new position coach, Mason Miller, let's see how this goes. And then once Baylor started winning, they had an excellent offensive line, especially for the kind of offense they were running. It feels like it's the same way on the defensive side. Dave Aranda says he wants to lean more into a Gary Patterson kind of philosophy, goes out and gets a Gary Patterson guy. And Tevin Williams, a guy who's been in this system, is elevated, man. So credit to the coaches and credit to Tevin for taking that extra initiative. And what I really like about this is what Dave says at the end there. He says his best football is still ahead of him. Love that. The other thing he says is when Tevin's really going to be on, he's going to be making plays on the football. So he's not just seeing like, oh, Tevin Williams, good game. We need some more of that out of him. He's saying, no, like this is going to surprise you guys, but Tevin's going to be a good player on this team, and he's going to start making plays on the ball. He's going to be forcing turnovers. He's going to be a ball hawk. And Baylor needs that over the last couple of seasons. They've not been one that has really forced the issue turnover-wise, really since 2021. And that would go a huge way. Of course, nobody turned the ball over on Friday night except on downs. But a lot of you guys that were in the Twitter thread talking about the positives from Friday talked a lot about the defensive backs, man. If you had told me that, hey, Tuesday after the Auburn game, you're going to be talking about how impressed you were with the defensive backs, I'd say that's great. Baylor won week 1. I never thought that it would be a 2-touchdown loss, and I'd be talking about how good the defensive backs were, but that's just how it shook out in the run game. Kevin Jennings, too. He had a pass deflection himself. He was covering a couple of different guys throughout the game. That is someone we've talked about a lot this year. Needs to get him right after a down 2024. That's a good start to it, man. That is a good start to it. And SMU, the team they're playing this week, might be a little banged up at that wide receiver position. Are the playmakers going to be there for the Ponies? Let's talk about it next on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode of your favorite show, Locked On Baylor, is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here. So close, man. And FanDuel's making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team, the Baylor Bears, or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. You know, Baylor Bears don't play in the NFL. So, are you ready to play? That's the question. If you are, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. I got to celebrate a really awesome achievement. I would call it an achievement this weekend, getting engaged by going to the Red Sox game, my favorite place on earth, the next day, and that's because of Game Time. But as you know, college football's back. I couldn't be more excited about it. You couldn't be more excited about it. Tailgates, rivalries, energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices getting jacked up at checkout, and you all of a sudden are paying a way different price than normal. We get it. We don't want it to be like that. That's where Game Time steps in, okay? The app gives you the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best price with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Okay. And that's what I like. That's really what I like, is what you seeing is what you're paying. So get on there for the SMU game. I know it's pretty close for a lot of you guys. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time and do it today. Let's take a look at SMU, shall we? This is a very interesting matchup for Baylor this week. You could argue, at least going into this season, that week 2 was a tougher matchup than week 1 because SMU is a team that made the college football playoff last year. You want to talk about the talent that probably does go towards Auburn and the talent that they bring back. But SMU sitting there at number 16 in the rankings. They took care of business against East Texas A&M. You might know it as A&M Commerce on Saturday, and they're sitting there at 1-0. So let's take a little look at SMU. We'll also have some of our patented Locked On Baylor trivia back at the end of this segment. SMU 1-0, Baylor 0-1. Certainly a difference in their quality of schedule through 1 week of the season. The Bears travel up to University Park, just outside of Dallas, but not in Dallas, right? On Saturday morning, 11 a.m., or you can catch it on the CW if you can't make it out to the game. 42-13 was the final score in that one. Dave talked about Kevin Jennings and the similarities between he and Jackson Arnold. Definitely another guy that can get outside of the pocket. But the worry for SMU, because Jennings had a good game. Jennings was fine. He threw for 2 touchdowns, ran for another one, threw for 260. But the concern for SMU certainly has to be the injury bug. They didn't run the football that effectively. Their leading rusher only had 44 yards in the game, and 2 of their starters went down in the first quarter of the season, one on each side of the ball. Alex Kilgore, linebacker who started all 14 games for them last year, had 5 tackles in the college football playoff. That's a big-time player to lose. And Jordan Hudson. No, not that Jordan Hudson. Those of you watched TCU North Carolina last night probably heard a lot about one Jordan Hudson. Not this one. Spells it like the regular Jordan. He's a kid who's been a stud for SMU the last couple of years at receiver. TCU transfer, rode the iron skillet road there. Top returning receiver they have. 39 catches for 422 and 5 touchdowns, which led the Mustangs last year in an 11-win season. So we talked about it with Grayson Singleton a few weeks ago, and we'll have a crossover later this week. But he had talked about it's not a great quantity of guys that are returning from a college football playoff team last year, but there is good quality of guys coming back from last year. And really, you would look at the quarterback-receiver combo of Jennings and Hudson to be a big part of that. Came down hard on a tackle, elbow injury. And if you watch the game like I did, he was in the tent for like 30 seconds and then went right back to the locker room, wasn't seen again. Part of that, sure, you don't want to, if there's anything that's, you want to be cautious is what I'm trying to say in a weird way. Like if there's anything that's going to go wrong, you don't want it to go wrong against East Texas A&M when you can save him for a bigger game. Rhett Lashley on Monday said the x-rays were negative, but he's unsure about the timetable. They put out their depth chart for this week. He is still listed as the starter, but it sounds like it really could be a game time kind of thing. And he does have a freshman as the backup. But I would say the initial outlook on SMU, which we'll talk more about tomorrow and Thursday, the initial outlook is Kevin Jennings is a lot like Jackson Arnold in that he can make plays with his feet almost as well as he can make plays with his arm. And certainly in the case of Arnold, he's better with his feet than he is with his arm. And so you can't just skate by playing the same defense you played last week. You can't just play too high the whole game. And with the way that Jennings can throw on the run, I don't know if a spy is really the answer either. You've got to be better at stopping the run. Good news is SMU played an FCS team and did not run the ball all that effectively on Saturday. In fact, a lot of the reports after the game were that they were pretty sloppy. And again, their leading rusher had 44 yards. and Jennings only rushed, I think, for 12 yards in this game. So it's not like they beat him on the ground. And I know, 42-13 is 42-13. It's not to take away from that, but you would have expected against an FCS opponent, you would have ran all over him the way that Auburn did to a Big 12 opponent. Anyway, SMU comes in as a team with a lot of confidence. Do they have all the guys in there from last year? No, they don't. But they did make the college football playoff last year. They really feel like they are a team that could be reckoned with in the ACC, which had a heck of a weekend, by the way. I'll have to talk about that with Grayson. Not exactly the best time to come at him with a Big 12 ACC debate after what we saw this past weekend. But, a lot of miscommunication. You're certainly seeing a lot of kinks to be worked out for this SMU team, which has a lot of new blood on it. Didn't run the football all that effectively. 8 penalties for 84 yards against an East Texas A&M team. There's a lot to kind of digest from this, both good and bad. And you're talking about 2 quarterbacks who look like Heisman dark horses. But Jennings himself was up and down. The down wasn't bad. I think he was 22 for 30. So it wasn't bad. A couple of drops in there, had a pick, threw a couple. He could have had another pick or two, much like Sawyer Robertson could have had. But this is going to be a fascinating game. I don't think it's going to be a cauldron of a home field advantage for SMU. These are teams whose players are going to be very familiar with each other, but their teams aren't very familiar with each other. SMU does enough of what Auburn does well that it could worry you. But like I said about Auburn, I'll say the same about SMU. I don't think they've seen an offense as good as Baylor's. I really don't. And maybe they will in the ACC this year with Cade Klubnik and Carson Beck. For sure they'll face some good quarterbacks. But in terms of the way that Baylor attacks you and how potent that offense is, I don't think they've seen an offense like Baylor's. But again, we'll hear from Dave Aranda about that tomorrow, about Kevin Jennings specifically, and we'll have Grayson Singleton later in the week to cross it over. But before we get you out of here, we do have trivia, the return of Locked On Baylor trivia. Okay, and this is SMU themed. And so you guys know I'm probably going a little bit in the Wayback Machine here, but this was a really fascinating one, okay? Eric Dickerson, you might have heard of him, played in something called the Pony Express at SMU and is one of the all-time Southwest Conference rush leaders. In fact, when he left school, he was the all-time leader in rushing yards in the Southwest Conference, Earl Campbell, number 2, and his teammate, Eric Dickerson's teammate, Greg James, number 3. Here's the question. Eric Dickerson led the Southwest Conference in rushing yards in 1981, but he did not make the All-American team. There were 2 running backs that beat him out. What I want to know is who were the 2 Heisman Trophy winning running backs and all-time college football greats that beat out Eric Dickerson on the 1981 All-American team. They are 2 guys you have heard of. Absolutely. They are 2 guys who contributed to a lot of success in the NFL, one in a pretty roundabout way. And like I said, they both were Heisman Trophy winners. So let me know who those 2 guys are in the comment section below. And let me know what you think about this SMU team and what your takeaways were from their game on Saturday and how Baylor matches up with them. Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel to get you ready for this game and every game all season long. We're coming off one of our best months in Locked On Baylor history, and I need you great Baylor fans to keep that momentum going. So like the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot. And thank you guys for making it your first listen today and every day. We will see you tomorrow, Wicker Wednesday, on another episode of your favorite show, Locked On. Get those trivia answers in the comment section and tweet at me at Locked On Baylor. Locked On Baylor.